The town of Hollow Creek was quiet, too quiet. It was like a ghost town, but people still lived there. They just knew better than to talk about the mansion on the hill. The mansion was grand once, with tall spires and sweeping balconies. Now it was a decaying skeleton. Its windows were like empty eyes staring out at the town. The paint peeled off its walls like scabs. Everyone knew the stories. They whispered them like secrets. The mansion was haunted. It was cursed. Elena was different. She had always been different ever since she was a little girl. While other children were frightened by the dark, Elena found it fascinating. The unknown, the mysterious, the eerie. All of it called to her in a way she couldn't explain. She wasn't afraid of the stories. In fact, she relished them. Ghost stories, tales of haunted places and legends of the supernatural were her favorite. They were like puzzles waiting to be solved, and Elena loved puzzles. She was drawn to them. The more spine-chilling the story, the more intrigued she became. It wasn't just about the fear, it was about the adventure, the mystery, and the thrill of uncovering secrets long buried. She loved the thrill of fear, the way it made her feel alive. It was a rush, a surge of adrenaline that made her heart race and her senses sharpen. It was like stepping into another world, one where anything was possible. The mansion on the hill was a challenge, a mystery she was determined to solve. It stood there, looming and foreboding, a relic of a bygone era. To others, it was a place to be avoided, but to Elena, it was an invitation. She spent hours in the library, reading about the mansion's history. She pored over old newspapers, diaries and letters, piecing together the story of the house and its inhabitants. Each new piece of information was a clue, a step closer to understanding the enigma that was the mansion. She learned about its original owners, a wealthy family who met a tragic end. The family had been prominent in their time, known for their wealth and influence. But their story was one of sorrow and misfortune, a tale that ended in mystery and despair. She learned about the strange occurrences, the whispers and shadows that haunted the halls. The mansion was said to be alive with the spirits of its past, and the more Elena learned, the more she felt a connection to it. Elena was hooked. She couldn't get enough of the stories, the legends, the eerie details that made the mansion so intriguing. She had to see it for herself. The mansion was more than just a building. It was a mystery waiting to be unraveled, a story waiting to be told, and Elena was determined to be the one to tell it. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for the challenge. The adventure of a lifetime awaited her, and she couldn't wait to begin. One night, a storm rolled in. It was the perfect night. The wind howled like a banshee, and rain lashed against the windows. Elena knew this was her chance. She snuck out of her house, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The walk to the mansion was long and treacherous. The wind whipped at her clothes, and the rain soaked through her shoes. But Elena didn't care. She was determined to reach her destination. The mansion loomed before her, more menacing than ever in the storm's fury. The old oak door creaked open as if inviting her in. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Cobwebs hung from every corner, and the smell of mildew filled her nostrils. Elena shivered, but she pressed on. Her flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating crumbling walls and broken furniture. The mansion was a graveyard of memories, each one whispering a tale of sorrow and despair. Section 5. The Whispering Shadows. Elena ventured deeper into the mansion, her flashlight beam dancing across the shadows. She could hear whispers now, faint and indistinct, like the rustle of silk dresses. They seemed to be coming from the shadows themselves. The shadows seemed to be alive, writhing and shifting in the corners of her vision. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. She told herself it was just the wind, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. Section 6. The Cracked Mirror. Elena found herself in a grand ballroom, its former glory now a distant memory. The once polished floor was now covered in debris, remnants of a time long past. Above her, the crystal chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, its crystals catching the dim light in a haunting dance. At the far end of the room she saw it, a focal point that seemed to draw her in. A cracked mirror, its surface tarnished with age and neglect, stood as a silent witness to the passage of time. Eleanor approached the mirror, drawn to its strange allure, as if it held secrets waiting to be uncovered. As she peered into its depths, she noticed something peculiar. Her reflection was different. It was not just a mere reflection, it was distorted, twisted into a grotesque mockery of her own face, as if the mirror was showing her a version of herself from another world. And it was moving on its own, independent of her actions, as if it had a life of its own. The reflection seemed to reach out, its eyes filled with a sorrowful longing. Eleanor's heart raced as she watched the reflection, her breath quickening. She felt a chill run down her spine. The ballroom seemed to grow darker, shadows flickering at the edges of her vision. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The mirror's surface began to glow faintly, casting an eerie light that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Eleanor took a step back, her instinct screaming at her to flee, but she was rooted to the spot, unable to tear her eyes away from the haunting reflection. The air grew thick with a sense of foreboding, as if the very walls of the ballroom were closing in on her. The images in the mirror began to shift, showing glimpses of scenes from a past she did not recognize, yet felt inexplicably connected to. Compelled by an unseen force, Elena reached out to touch the mirror, her fingers trembling as they made contact with the cold, cracked surface. The moment her fingers touched the glass, a jolt of energy surged through her, and the room around her seemed to dissolve into darkness. She felt herself being pulled into the mirror, the ballroom fading away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of mystery and the unknown. Section 7, Trapped in Terror. Elena gasped, stumbling back from the mirror. Her reflection reached out, its long, bony fingers scraping against the glass. A voice, raspy and chilling, whispered from the mirror's depths. "You're trapped now," it hissed. Panic seized Eleanor. She tried to run, but the shadows had other plans. They shot out from the walls, swirling around her like living tendrils of darkness. Eleanor thrashed and screamed, but it was no use. The shadows held her fast, their grip tightening with every passing second. Section 8, Consumed by Darkness. The whispering voices grew louder, taunting her, mocking her fear. Elena felt herself being pulled, slowly but surely, towards the mirror. Her reflection grinned wickedly, its eyes glowing with malevolent delight. With a final, strangled cry, Eleanor was consumed by the darkness. The shadows retreated, leaving the room silent and still. The mirror was once again just a mirror, reflecting nothing but the empty ballroom. Elena was gone. Section 9, The Search Party. The next morning, the storm had passed. The townspeople, worried about Eleanor's disappearance, formed a search party. They scoured the town, their hearts heavy with dread. Finally, they reached the mansion on the hill. The old oak door was still ajar. They entered cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Section 10, A Grim Reflection. The townspeople searched every nook and cranny of the mansion, their lanterns casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay, making every breath a struggle. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls. But Elena was nowhere to be found. Each room they entered seemed more desolate than the last, filled with the remnants of a life long forgotten. Cobwebs hung like curtains, and the silence was almost deafening. Just when they were about to give up hope, their faces etched with despair and exhaustion, a faint glimmer caught the eye of one of the searchers. One of them noticed something strange. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible movement in the corner of the ballroom, where an old, cracked mirror stood. It was the cracked mirror in the ballroom. The glass was fractured, its surface marred by countless lines that seemed to form a web of despair. And staring back at them, her face pale and her eyes wide with terror, was Elena, trapped. Her expression was one of sheer horror, as if she had seen something beyond comprehension. Her hands pressed against the glass, as if trying to break free from her prison, forever a prisoner of the whispering shadows. The shadows seemed to dance around her, whispering secrets that only she could hear, their voices a constant reminder of her eternal captivity. The mansion on the hill remained silent, its imposing structure a stark contrast to the vibrant life that once filled its halls. Now it stood as a monument to sorrow and loss, its secrets safe within its decaying walls. The walls, once adorned with beautiful tapestries and paintings, were now crumbling, their stories fading into oblivion. But the townspeople knew deep in their hearts that the mansion's grip on Eleanor was unbreakable. Their faces reflected a mix of fear and determination, knowing that they had to find a way to save her, that Eleanor's story was far from over. The mansion had a way of drawing people in, ensnaring them in its web of darkness and despair. The mansion had claimed another victim. Eleanor was not the first, and she would not be the last. The house seemed to have a life of its own, feeding on the fear and sorrow of those who entered, and it would not be the last. The townspeople could feel the mansion's malevolent presence, a constant reminder that the whispering shadows were always watching, always waiting for their next victim.